Well, good morning. Good morning indeed, and welcome to today's webinar focused on the United Arab Emirates and the energy transition leadership. We're delighted to welcome back Henry Tillman, founder and editor of China Investment Research and Grayson's Peak Services, a good friend of the FS Club, and Henry, we're really looking forward to the session today. You'll know me, I'm Mike Wardle. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at ZN. My job here today is to just hold the chairmanship and to moderate the session. And by way of introduction, first of all, some thanks. We are very fortunate at the FS Club to have a range of sponsors who support us in and enable us in providing such a wide range of content, and we really are grateful for their continued support. The program today is very simple. I have a few minutes to introduce the session. We'll have the keynote presentation from Henry, and then there'll be time for Q&A towards the end. If you want to ask a question, the way to do it is to find the question tab on the GoToWebinar dashboard on your screen, type in your question or your comment, your observation, and that will come to us. And you can type that in, and we would like you to respond at any point during the session today. If you do put a question in, we'll give your contact details to Henry after the event to make sure that if there's no need for any further discussion or follow-up, that can take place. And also to say that today the session is being recorded. This means that if you miss anything vital, you can go back and re-watch it, or you can indeed share a link to the recording with your friends and colleagues who you feel may be interested. And the recording will be up and live on the site within a couple of days. I think that's all by way of the housekeeping for today. It's a real pleasure to introduce Henry Tillman. And Henry tracks investments across the world and what's really happening in terms of capital flows. I'm really looking forward, Henry, to your insights today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. I would like to say in the entry remarks that I'm going to walk you through a document. Unfortunately, it has too many words. I've done that because it has to go out to several people. But I'm not going to bore you with the words today. I'll highlight certain numbers among the text. Really speak off-piste with things I can't reduce to writing, and which are macro trends driving all of this, which are quite extraordinary in the world we live in today, where I don't find people speaking about it except for very senior levels. So with that as a background, maybe I get to the first page. Thank you. And again, I'm not going to have you read all this, but the basic highlights are, the top is really to talk about, people think of UAE, think of hydrocarbons. That's changing rapidly. And then the second part is really, we talk about the boom they've had in stock markets in 22 and 23. We then look a little farther down the road with the GCC rail and how that works into a bigger rail, which Mr. Biden was talking about previously, which had been agreed 2 years ago before he turned up. And then we talk a bit about Masdar and how to show you how fast they grow. And then we give you some examples of how that goes into Africa. If you get the next page, please. Here's the page everyone thinks about when they think of UAE, hydrocarbons. You see the second bullet point, number 6 in the world. 6th bullet, that's in oil. The 5th bullet point, they're 7th in the world in LNG. And you can also see in the middle bullet points, they're going from 3 million barrels per day of oil to 5 billion, so they are producing more oil. And you see the economy is heavily dependent to date on oil and gas and its exports. But the transition is the last bullet point you see, which is UAE was the first Arab state to set a net zero emissions target, and hence COP28 you're hearing at the end of the month. So here's some examples in the next few pages of how they're making this transition, which is quite impressive. Next page, please. So the solar park is the world's largest single-site solar park. I don't have to show you all this, but the second from the bottom is when it's fully done, it's 5 gigawatts of power, and by that has 6.5 million tons of carbon emissions per year it captures. So again, largest in the world, largest renewable projects for independent power producers in the world, 2.5 gigs now, and going to 5 gigs by 2030. Impressive because it is the world's largest. Next page, please. Not to be outdone, hydro. This is not the world's largest, although it's the first. You see on the first bullet point, it's the first of its kind in the GCC region. So it's what's unique about this is it's a combination of hydro from the dam and also a tourist site below the dam where the water gets recycled. So it's multiple use basically, and you can see there it's on course for Q4 24, where it'll have do 250 homes a year, 1,000 homes per year, and a lifespan of 80 years. So not the biggest ones you're going to find like in Asia, but still the first of its kind in the GCC region, again led by the UAE. Next bullet point, please. Waste to energy. I find this quite impressive. It's the world's largest and most efficient waste to energy facility in Dubai, become fully operational by Q1 next year. So it's, and you can see the size of this. The second point, just the data, you can read on your own. But the third bullet point is this alone will get to Dubai its goal of 75% waste diversion by 2025. You might want to ask yourself how many countries in the world have these three, including waste, which represents 75% of the target by 2025. It's already, the smaller ones are already functioning. This is the newest one to get done again. You see by next year. Next page, please. Not to be outdone, desalination. You just look at the second bullet point, second line. You see it's a desalination project, which is the third largest in the UAE. They already have three in the UAE, and just I didn't put this down, but for numbers wise, currently without this plant being done, that's 42% of UAE's water daily usage is from the existing ones, the existing three. While this will tilt it towards 70%, Kuwait leads with 90% of its water supply desalinated. Saudi's at 70%. So it's not just these. It's not just UAE, but the whole region is turning green quickly, despite the amount of oil. Again, and desalination there or thereabouts. Next is even more impressive. Again, that's the French helping that. This is the Koreans leading with this. That's KEPCO. For those of you who don't know KEPCO is the largest power producer in Korea. It has it's built the first nuclear power plant in the UAE and the Arabian Peninsula and the whole Arab world. As you see, there's 4 nuclear reactors. It's intended to supply 25% of UAE's energy needs, as you see. But last year alone, that plant went up to 48% of Abu Dhabi's electricity requirements last winter alone. So already, before this is done, it's the single largest generator of electricity and largest source of clean electricity in the region already. That's the existing nuclear power plant. Next page, please. So you don't have to read all this. Basically, that China has 53 nuclear projects already and 20 and more in construction. Let me take just a couple minutes of our time to talk about the third bullet point, which I presented at the Arctic Circle Forum 2 weeks ago to 50 countries. So in 1950, and those of you that have seen Oppenheimer, you will have seen Teller had a go at Oppenheimer and didn't help his reputation going forward. But Teller himself created the hydrogen atomic weapon, and then also created something called thorium nuclear power in the 1950s. And in 1959, and thorium nuclear power is basically an element called thorium, which connected with 233 uranium produces nuclear power, but there's no plutonium, so there's no explosive. It's non-explosive. And this operated. It was created in '59. He presented to the first oil company in America in 1959, saying we should deal with CO2 because it's going to become a problem, and thorium is a way to do it. And in 1962 to 1972, that thorium ran a cargo ship successfully for 10 years. And then from 65 to 69, it ran Oak Ridge nuclear power plant in America, and also ran another one after that. And finally, Rickover and the U.S. Navy was a big fan of it. So was pushing the development by the U.S. government of thorium, which had the IP, which Richard Nixon killed in 1975. There are lots of reasons for that. You can find, there's all kinds of things about Wikipedia, but I won't say the obvious, but you will recognize that in the 60s, the priority was not green air, it was actually new explosive devices to kill other people. Hence the other two I talked about before. But in 2010, two brave American senators, Orrin Hatch and Harry Reid, jointly said to Chairman Jiang's son when he was living in America, you could take this IP technology and build this nuclear power plant, this nuclear power with this IP, provided you give the IP back to us, and then we would share it with the world. So the IP sat from 75 to 2010 in the United States, never been developed. In 2011, China started working on this, and in 2023, this is now a functional power plant. So by 2030, this is a non-explosive onshore nuclear. Well, it's scheduled to produce 20,000 gigawatts. That's enough for 40 countries by one plant itself. Again, non-explosive. And for those of you who don't know, thorium is available in widely available across 35 countries. Biggest deposits are in India, biggest deposits are in Australia. And so China's plan is to build over 40 of these on BRI countries. Again, no water required, you build them in deserts. So this is the next phase of this. I believe this will be, certainly UAE will be a winner in having this as a core base. Again, a core base with the renewables sitting on top of this. Next page, please. You're aware of all three of these stock markets. If not, you can review at your convenience. The last sentence, though, is worth noting, which is basically it started with construction and real estate. It's now moved into banking and finance and in all technology. So it's taken about 20 years to develop. The last 5 to 7 years have been really in technology as well as banking and finance and new energy. Next page, please. I personally find this extraordinary because until I got into this, I didn't realize the good news that's coming out of this. So you see the top, the Abu Dhabi Exchange was second for leading in the region, 20% up last year. Foreign investment increased, market caps increased. And remember, this is done in the context of last year's global indices, which is the worst performance since 2008. So the world index fell 20%, NASDAQ by 33%, S&P 19%. Meanwhile, Abu Dhabi is up 20%. Massively different. Because the world is waking up to the power of what's happening of the power, financial power of the Gulf and the attractiveness of investing in the Gulf and working in the Gulf. Next page, please. Not to be outdone, Dubai. Earlier this year, it reached its 8-year high in the stock market. 14%. It's taken 8 years to get back to where it was in 2015, or I think, yes, 2015. You see it's outperformed the Morgan Stanley index so far this year. And it's part of this regional IPO boom. We briefly mentioned below on this. It's 3 billion Q1. It's third worldwide, but I should also note, not only is it interesting, but the people are clamoring for these shares. So basically you have ridiculous oversubscription. I think one or two of these were over 100%, over 100 times oversubscribed. This also has happened in green bonds. For example, Vanstar, this green bond was multiple times oversubscribed. So there's huge investment. And those that can't get done this year have pushed it back to next year because it's a little slower for all the things you know about in today's world. So there's still a great deal of buildup, much done so far this year, and again, continue to attract foreign capital. I might also, I'll just wait a bit. Next page, please. Right, so the only thing looking at, I want to point to here is the second one, which is Goldman talking about how MENA is becoming more important as a market. So the MSCI index will go from 7.3 to 10% near term. You see the re-rating Goldman's going to put on these emerging markets and also the investors around the world. And I think it's shocking to look at the last point, which is how much this is expected to grow from what it is today into 2075 by 10x in terms of size and overall importance. Maybe get to the next page, please. Longer term, we've heard Biden talk about the rail among GCC here. This is the planned rail from GCC, which was approved long before Mr. Biden made his statements. And you'll see the black route is the UAE route, which will go along the water in the UAE and go across into Oman. I was with the tourism people yesterday. And the link will go across from Abu Dhabi across to the port, so it doesn't necessarily go all the way to the point. The rail does, but there'll be a shortcut across from Abu Dhabi, which is determining the timing of this execution and also the funding of it. And of course, Saudi Rail, which was a dream many, many years ago, is already starting construction. The Saudis have licensed that to the Chinese, not the Americans in high-speed rail. So you can see this is all taking shape. Now, why do I show this? Because what I don't want to show you, because of what's happening in the world today, is if you go to Egypt and put a hat across all this, as a cover over all those, you'll see that's all linked into Turkey, where Turkey's worked all that together, ultimately into the Baltic region. The only piece that's missing on that hat, the Baltic region, is Palestine. So for obvious reasons, I've left the cap of this thing off the top of it, but assume Turkey has a vested interest in linking all of this together via Turkey ultimately the Baltic, the Black Sea. But this is all under construction. It's been agreed since 2009. It's been fast tracked since 2021. So they're progressing very quickly to link this into this whole region, which MBS has said will be the new Europe. Next page, please. This is, I work for a company called Iona Investment Research, you see on the left-hand side. Iona is a Dubai-based consulting company. I'm the COO of the company. The company, our chairman was the chairman of Arlington Energy here in the UK, where Masdar committed £1 billion to grow the business last year. So we're quite close to Masdar. Masdar is controlled by TAQA and by ADNOC. In green energy, and you can see what's happened in 18 months with Masdar's investments. It's really extraordinary. And remember also, Masdar and all these things they're doing here, they may start with a joint venture, but these are ultimately controlling stakes. So it's funds, capital flowing out of the UAE via Masdar, via ADNOC, via TAQA into all these different countries. Next page, please. This gets interesting. So I don't want you to read the first 3 bullet points. We'll talk about the last one now. These are here for a reason, because we work with the Hong Kong government, with the UK government, and this is for them to show that, yes, we acknowledge what you're doing. What this is really about is the following. If you don't know this, as you know, a body needs water and blood to live, basically, right? So it kind of needs around 180 billion a year inbound FDI to continue to disrupt the growth. They've been capped in capital markets in the US, and in the last 9 months, they've been increasingly being capped by US and its allies, squeezing investment into China. US private equity funds have dried up into China. US venture capital firms have dried up into China, therefore squeezing China's inbound FDI flow. At the same time, China's returned the favor, because basically the U.S. is printing new debt at a rate of $1 trillion a quarter. That's correct. It took over 200 years to get to $500 billion. They're not printing debt $1 trillion per quarter, which China is no longer buying, which UAE is no longer buying, which Saudi is no longer buying, and which the BRICS are no longer buying. So you're looking at a U.S. deficit, which is going to cost more and more and more interest, and no one's buying this stuff. You have 2 of the world's biggest powers trying to squeeze each other economically deeply at a point. So what's happened here is, beginning in 2022, continuing through 2023, UAE and Saudi have reached out, and all GCC has reached out to East Asia, not just China, but also Hong Kong and also other regions, other part of East Asia, where basically there's tremendous flows going in. So in essence, right now, Saudi and UAE and those funds I told you about before have roughly 1 trillion under management, and by 2030 they'll go to 2 trillion under management. So if you want to then take, and if China needs 181 per year to run the country, that 2 trillion over the next 7 years is the UAE can and Saudi alone can fund China's growth. So no matter how America squeezes it, tries to kill it, these other countries who are sitting on the cash will invest in this growth. The quid pro quo is obviously China's using its technology in the Middle East. For to be specific, it's the piece we haven't released till next week. Earlier this year, when the venture capital markets around the world tightened, fallen in half in 22, fallen in half again in 23. Mubadala, one of the biggest investors in the UAE, has basically put several $100 million tranches into some of China's fastest growing companies. So again, the interdependency, the more importance of the Gulf with China and with Hong Kong is becoming more important as the U.S. has squeezed out other options. Now on to the last point. By the way, on that point, if you go back for a second, I want to cover that last point. The last point, digital currency, and you'll see it's not just investment flows; it's also how do you work on a digital currency, cross-border digital currency. Again, Hong Kong, China, Thailand, UAE, with Hong Kong Central Bank. So longer term, that digital bank, the digital pieces that China's been testing the last 2 or 3 years with Hong Kong, will now broaden to include other companies, including the Gulf, as we see here. Thank you. Next page. Yeah, I guess one last piece is what's happening in COP28. I'm not going because my boss is going, and I know my boss is a pretty important man, to be our chairman, to be there. But I just highlight a couple more things. One is UAE is launching a $4.5 billion fund for Africa at the end of this month, which is an Abu Dhabi fund development, Etihad credit insurance, and Masdar. So that's $4.5 billion a capital platform for Africa. And then I think we also follow through something called GCC MENA renewable financing. There's a whole lot of more information on how these flows are, but we can assure you that the primary flows, capital flows to rebuild renewable markets around the world, whether it's East Asia, whether it's Central Asia, are being driven by the Gulf. So it's not just hydrocarbons; they're recycling that equity and that debt to rebuild the rest of the world's transition towards renewables. I think, Mike, that's about enough. I'm at 25 minutes, so we can then open it to questions, if that's okay with everybody.
Well, thank you very much, Henry. There's a lot of detail in there, but also some really interesting thoughts about global trends. We've got a number of questions already come in, but please do continue putting your questions through using the dashboard. Herbie Skeet has asked the question of just comparing capital markets in the region. If you were to look at Qatar versus UAE, and if UAE is leading, what steps do you think Qatar needs to take to catch up and challenge UAE for leadership?
Well, first of all, this is not a GCC presentation, it's a UAE presentation. But I would say, from a banking point of view, we follow Saudi quite closely as it opens up closely. So I'm looking in terms of priorities. I would say, and the others are smaller, much smaller in the region, as you probably know. I think it was ADNOC had an IPO they did in Egypt this summer. So that these are much smaller exchanges where the focus to date has been UAE for obvious reasons, and with Saudi behind it. And from a banking perspective, I could tell you big banks in the Gulf are much more focused on UAE with large underwriting spreads than Saudi with virtually no underwriting spreads. And I'm not sure where Qatar is, so I can't talk about Qatar per se, but I will say these markets will continue to flourish. And it's not just me; it's Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and global investors. We track all this stuff. I haven't seen that much Qatar outbound, and I haven't seen that much Qatar inbound. So the flows are not really so much in and out of there from an investment flow point of view. And I'm not sure about public markets. Can't comment. Sorry.
That's okay. Herbert, you'll have to go and do your own research, I think, on Qatar and where we are. A question from Haitanaska, who's just wondering whether you're up to date with what the UAE's policy is on controlling emissions from the oil and gas sector, since there are new regulations coming in that include the oil and gas marine export shipping. But how are they approaching the question of controlling emissions or reducing emissions from the oil and gas sector?
I think I would again defer to COP28 because a lot of this stuff's still in writing. I'm aware of some of the policy issues being discussed. I'm aware of some of the investments that are going to be discussed. But I'd rather not jump ahead of what's going to happen out of COP28. From a shipping point of view, I've just presented. If you want, Mike, I'll send you this document on shipping. I've done a comprehensive piece on nuclear shipping and IMO and ABS and all that on shipping exchanges and rules regarding emissions on shipping. I'm happy to send that to you to share with your clients.
Super, thank you very much. Clive Bullens asked the question, given the rise in global temperatures, is there more that can be done in the region to harness solar power and to help poorer countries with solar? I think you mentioned the investment flowing from UAE to Africa. And as part of that, do you know whether part of that is directed towards the energy transition in Africa?
So we are a firm that advises on what mix you would want from a country. So we talk to countries and say, what should our mix look like today? What should it look like 5 or 10 years from now, et cetera, et cetera. So we look at all different forms of energy. Yes, and I've tried to give you a tip that once that thorium piece, yes, is good to go. But there are two angles of it. So it's Gen 4 nuclear. Today, you don't have time to go through Gen 4 nuclear today on this. That's a much longer conversation. But Gen 4 nuclear is now functional. It's functional with small modular reactors, which are being led by Westinghouse in the United States and Rolls-Royce here in the UK. They're looking for sanctions from both governments, sign off from both governments by 2024. These are game changers. So yes, that's number one. Number two, thorium is a complete game changer because basically it's my understanding, and I've spoken to China about this, but I don't have formal commitment, nor should I get formal commitment. But the plan, I think, in these 41 countries is the core base for running the country will be thorium, because there's no explosions and virtually no nuclear remains, basically. And if there are, they're less than 100 years versus 10,000 years. So these will be core to run the country, but they won't be fully functional until 33, 34, something like that. But these small modular reactors is really where a lot of these countries are going to go, not so much solar. So the understanding is, back to the hat on top, if the core is Gen 4 reactors, Gen 4 nuclear, the top of that would then be solar, wind, yes, hydro, etc. Hydrogen. Yes, but it's a race, whereas we know it's a race, who does what, how fast it is, etc., etc. I'm a strong believer, if you haven't followed these new small modular reactors, you really need to do that if you're interested in this, because that's the growth area. I spoke on a panel with U.S. Nuclear Power, so mine was complimentary because I did the thorium piece and the offshore shipping piece, and they did the onshore modular reactor piece. So I think you probably could get that from their presentation too. So I'll try and get that for you from. Anyway, but anybody who's looking at energy should look at these Gen 4 reactors because they're non-explosive. It's completely what you have learned about nuclear historically. That's part of any.
Thank you very much. Athanaska is also asking, are there about the targets to cut emissions and the desalination processing? And I imagine this is really about energy mix. If you're using oil to run your desalination plant, there's one emissions pattern, but if you're using cheap nuclear or solar to generate that energy, you've got a different emissions target. But do you know whether the new technologies you're talking about, so the new investments, infrastructure investments, are tied together so that the energy is coming from the new renewables?
Yeah, the answer is yes, yes, yeah. But I think it varies by country. I mean, it's so interesting. I was with over 50 countries last week in Iceland, and to hear some of these countries that you think are so advanced, one country, I won't use names, can run the whole country offshore wind, but they have no battery storage, none. It hasn't come to their head. Oh my gosh, we should build battery storage because when the wind stops blowing, they don't need batteries. Wrong. When the wind stops blowing, you still need batteries to run the power of the offshore wind. So it depends. I mean, I don't, outside of somewhere like the UAE and maybe Saudi, because also we're working with Saudi on algae to biofuel. Incredible. It's being led by Malaysia, and the Malaysian finance minister, energy minister actually talks about now that they fly on biofuel driven by algae. So all this stuff's all new, and these mixes are different depending on where they are. So, but so far, Saudi's not approved this. Where Malaysia's used it, Japan's using it, China's using it, Saudi's not approved it yet. Again, the energy mix keeps moving, but the new technology is being formed.
I think that's right, and I think if you look across different parts of the world, there's different technologies coming to the fore in different places, and all of these options are the ones that are available. But very interesting to hear your thinking about sort of modular reactors. Hervey Skeet is intrigued by the thorium story. His first degree, there was in nuclear energy back in the 70s. But
well, he should know all this then. Hey, why did you guys do this? Why'd you sit on this for 25 years, you guys? Come on.
Well, no, but his question is how come the thorium story was untold back then?
Well, you'll have to ask Mr. Nixon. And if any of you guys are submarine people, like I'm a friend of submarines, Rickofer was all over this. And if you've seen Oppenheimer, you see there are characters involved in here. And some of those characters of these brilliant scientists rubbed people the wrong way. Right? So things didn't happen just because you're a brilliant scientist, you're still stuck in these massive things called governments. Why Richard Nixon said kill it, I have no idea. You'll have to ask. I have found a series. I've actually found enough text to write the script for the follow-on from Oppenheimer, because that's what this is really. That's the Oppenheimer piece that hasn't been told. So I've actually found all that stuff, which is really quite juicy.
But that sounds like you and Herbie might need to go out for a brief half together and swap stories.
I'm not allowed to say this in a public setting, but and I'm not sure I want to say it on tape, but if you could come to the conclusion that someone thought, why do I want to have power, even though Eisenhower said it's meant for safety, why do I want to have power to help green the world when I could have uranium rods to blow up the world? You could argue that, right? For example.
Yeah. Shane Trinian has put a question, and he's asked, what changes do you think we'll see in US fiscal policy as a result of the move away from the dollar by the Saudi, UAE, BRICS, China? Where does the US go in its response?
I don't think they have a clue, actually. I think that I believe that the Hamas was a trap. I follow ex-CIA people closely, and Hamas is a trap to draw America in to bankrupt them in Iran and Turkey. That's why all those military people are there. That's why U.S. have already shut down discussions with Zelensky. So I think this is all a trap to break the U.S. to bankrupt the U.S. Don't you believe that?
But do you see that's the only story, or is there other things the US are doing?
Obviously, I said Palestine's missing from the linkage, or didn't I? I said Palestine's linking from the rail linkage. Yes, as well. But yes, I do believe that there's a war between China and the U.S. and who can outspend and who can raise enough money to outspend the other one. It's a variation of the Soviet Union, in my opinion. But I'm just a banker, so what do I know?
I think the other interesting thing here is, for me, is just looking ahead to COP, and with the COP taking place in Dubai, and UAE wanting to demonstrate, I guess, its leadership in terms of energy transition. Is this just the Gulf states becoming more confident, more able to show their financial and economic weight? And are they using that the sovereign wealth funds to create a position in the world?
It's multiple reasons, as you can tell by your question, right? So first of all, they address this. That everyone's saying, "Yeah, hydrocarbons, you're not helping the world." So I've tried a few examples to show you how they've worked in this for some period of time. They addressed this a long time ago, actually, and now it's accelerating, and now they're reselling or rating it around all those other countries I showed you. That's one piece of it. But sure, once we get to a world where you can't IPO, Chinese can't IPO in the USA, right? And the other European markets don't want to help them. You've got to actually have enough cash flow to run the country. You got to find them someplace. Yes, and what does China have to offer? We track these investments, Gulf into other parts of the world, and the Gulf, virtually no Chinese investment. All Chinese construction, EPC contracts, technology, battery technology for NEVs, et cetera. Yes, AI, smart cities, that's all Chinese technology, but it's not Chinese investment. So the quid pro quo is there's the investment that comes from the Gulf, but that technology comes from China because the Chinese have the leading technology, which it goes back to years of research, et cetera, et cetera. China now leads the world in research. China now leads the world in IP submissions, while the rest of the world's doing other things.
Yes, I mean, if you just look at the number of patents filed per head of population in China, exactly. It way outstrips any other country in the world. Yeah. Just future gazing, I guess. Ian Stewart has just noted that the US dollar as share of global forex and forex reserves hasn't changed materially since 2019. But saying BRICS, and the others don't have an alternative currency. Where's the alternative to US dollar narrative coming from?
He
described that as a false narrative.
No, that's all correct. I come at you, as you know, Mike. I come at it from the detail up. So if I look at it, 2 days ago, the first Argentina trade has come out of RMB between Argentina and RMB. As you know, all Russian oil with India's Russian currency, with its local currencies, are what making these trades. And you saw Kenya said, I don't want to use the dollar anymore until I have to. So all trades are bilateral trades with their own currencies in Africa. It's just people want to go with their own individual currencies and not lock themselves to the dollar. I mean, it's not good when Afghanistan has no money because the U.S. took $7 billion in cash away from Afghanistan and then people are starving, or $350 billion out of just automatically out of Russia. There are a lot of countries, as you know, Indonesia has threatened to stop MasterCard and Visa for this reason. Because someday, I was at a film opening 3 weeks ago by the FBI, and the FBI was quoting in it, fantastic, where someone from the FBI said, if you ever trade a dollar anywhere in the world, we can arrest you. In a film, in a feature film. So I don't think when people hear that makes them very comfortable. They're looking for their own currency.
Thank you. That's very clear. You also mentioned sort of flow of UAE investment to places other than China in Asia. And you and I have spoken before about looking at Malaysia and Vietnam and the other places which are now picking up investment. Do you think this is again a strategic move on the part of UAE to be close to those emerging economies in Asia?
Well, I think first of all, they're the Arab Brotherhood. These go back thousands of years, everybody, right? I mean, they're very close. My understanding of something I've been working on tangentially is a sizable fund coming out of COP28 going into Malaysia and Indonesia. You've seen massive protests the last 48 hours in Indonesia about what's happening in Palestine. There's the world's, the Islamic population is getting bigger and bigger as part of the world, and that's a long-standing brotherhood. And there's wealth accumulating in those countries. And I expect them to be friends with each other, and it's close. They're very close, and they don't want to be disrupted by anybody else. And they're drawing, and this stuff's happening to disrupt that, and I think it'll just draw them closer.
We're coming towards the end of the session, but I wonder whether, if you were given the position of advising UK investors or UK government on their positioning, what kind of response would you be advising at the moment in terms of UAE in particular?
I'm a practical guy.
We've got already close links with UAE, but where do we go from here?
Well, I'm a practical guy, so I'm, as you know. So first of all, the UAE has been fantastic to the UK as an investor. Yes, we have a 5G third generation port in the southeast part of the country. Fantastic, right? Yes, and no one talks about it. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
You might know that, and an SEZ around it, but people don't talk about it, right? This has been fantastic. So in the Masdar case, they put $1 billion into Arlington here for battery storage. They've also followed up with some AI to follow with that as a follow-on deal. However, they've been very, very local of saying we want to do a lot more, and we're blocked by people who don't want to do a lot more. They say they want to do a lot more, but operation they're not. Now, I'm not involved in those political discussions, but it's obvious they're frustrated because they made it very clear when someone puts £1 billion in your country for battery storage, you want to grow the business, and Masdar is not someone. These are very quiet, private people, professional people. I work with them. They're not. It's not normal for them to whinge or complain in newspapers, and I think they feel frustrated, and that's what certainly the behavior is. So I think there's a very warm relationship between the two countries. I think also they put some money into life sciences for us here. It's been terrific. But I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating, not just in the concept. And I think operationally, it's not really worked to date as it's planned, unfortunately. Although we just signed a deal last Monday on a small battery cell company, which is unique in this country. The technology is unique in the country. It can be used elsewhere. But again, funding was led by UAE and Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So that's another technology and innovation from UAE and Hong Kong into the UK, and then we have the technology that can be used elsewhere. So it's still happening. The investment's still happening. It's very active. The question is, how do you then move on to the practical side of it?
Well, Henry, thank you so much. We are, I'm afraid, out of time, but it's been a fascinating run through a whole set of news, I guess, from the UAE and the successes that they've had there. So just looking ahead, we have some interesting. First of all, again, to thank our sponsors. I mentioned them earlier, but we really are grateful for their support and like to range freely in these webinars across a range of subjects. Coming up tomorrow, a session on whether the City of London has benefited from Brexit as the golden days continue to fade. Next Tuesday, why London is the best place in the world to resolve legal disputes. Wednesday the 15th, the psychology behind getting what you want. Really looking forward to those. Do keep an eye on the website for forthcoming events. Henry, a large thank you again for organising this session. Really timely in the lead up to COP28. As always, we're very grateful to you for your insights. So thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for taking part. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
I will send the thorium marine piece to you and share with anybody who wants to read it. Okay.
Super. Thank you very much, Henry. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye.